Greetings from Michigan, which became America's 26th state on the 26th of January, 1837. Over 10 million people call Michigan home, making it the 8th most populous state in the nation.
Gander and goose, they're considered Michigonian. I don't think that cut any ice. I don't think that was very appealing to people. So we're still, as far as I know, we're still Michiganders.
Ask any native Michigander exactly where in Michigan they're from, and more than likely you'll be offered the hand.
If you look at a map of the United States, it's easy to find Michigan because we're the only one that looks like a hand. It's what we sometimes call the mitten state.
I'm like the east side of Detroit, right about here.
I'm from Holland, Michigan, and Holland is right here.
I am from here, which is Jackson, Michigan.
Manistee between Grand Rapids and Traverse City. Mackinac Island's out here.
Michigan's handprint is encircled by 4 of the Great Lakes: Superior to the north, Michigan to the west, Huron and Erie to the east. It was the Great Lakes and their tributaries that attracted Michigan's earliest settlers, many of whom came from New England, which may explain why Michigan has a New Haven, a Bennington, and a Vermontville. 2 of those New Englanders who helped put Michigan on the map were brothers John and Will Kellogg. While trying to invent a dietary substitute for bread, they forced a batch of dry dough through steel rollers and changed breakfast forever. The Kellogg's marketed their creation as cornflakes. Michigan also gives us more cherries than any other state and is the nation's 3rd leading grower of Christmas trees. It has the most lighthouses, with 150, and is one of 4 states that still offers mail delivery by boat. But all of that takes a back seat to the industry that has fueled Michigan's economy for years: making cars.
The auto industry developed at a very, very rapid pace in the very first decade of the 20th century. People think about the Motor City, but the state is really the Motor State.
Michigan is the headquarters of America's big 3 automakers: Ford, General Motors, and Daimler Chrysler. The fluctuating fortunes of these industrial giants can have a statewide impact.
In good times, Michigan tends to be one of the states with the lowest unemployment rate in the country. When consumer demand begins to wane, many people are thrown out of work. And in those bad times, Michigan's unemployment rate generally does not mirror the nation at large. It always surpasses it.
For one former auto worker, the job insecurity was motivation to borrow $800 and start his own business. His name was Barry Gordy. The business? Motown Records.
At the Hitchfield facility. And Mr. Gordy was a singer and producer and songwriter, and he was able to take this raw talent from the city of Detroit and turning them into superstars and selling millions of records.
Barry Gordy's family had come to Michigan from Georgia in 1922 as part of what's known as the Great Migration. In the years between 1910 and 1930, more than 1 million African Americans relocated from the South to northern industrial centers like Detroit, which saw a 20% increase in its black population. Many came in search of better jobs at Michigan's factories. Those same opportunities also lured large groups of immigrants from around the world. Polish people are the largest ethnic group in the state, with many centered around the town of Hamtramck near Detroit, which itself has a strong Arab community that contributes to its diverse, multi-ethnic population.
The Detroit area has the largest concentration of Arab-speaking people anywhere in the United States. It includes people from virtually every country of the Middle East, from Egypt to Lebanon to Syria to Iraq to Iran.
In the 19th century, many of Michigan's immigrants were enticed by the burgeoning lumber industry. The vast expanse of old-growth white pines on the peninsula seemed to promise endless prosperity to loggers and timber barons alike. In its heyday, lumber was as lucrative for Michigan as the gold rush had been for California.
In the 1860s, in the 1870s, and 1880s, Michigan was the leading producer of lumber in the entire United States.
When the logs were sent down the river to the area where the sawmills were, sometimes as many as 20 different logging companies would have logs in this mix. They would brand each log like you would brand a cow. And like the Wild West, there were sometimes log rustlers who tried to steal someone else's logs, and they were punished very severely when they were caught. You just don't steal another man's logs.
By the early 20th century, however, Michigan's forests had been overharvested. Today, generations of conservation and replanting have replenished this resource, thanks in large part to a state forest system that has grown from a single small preserve in 1903 to some 4 million acres of trees.
And today, Michigan boasts the largest state system of any state in the Union. Thousands, if not millions of people flock to Michigan's woods to hike, to view nature, to just enjoy themselves in the outdoors.
Last time I was in Manistee, by the way, I was driving along and I saw an eagle come down over the bridge, lift a salmon out of the river, and went off to have supper. Now, that was very exciting, because when I was a kid, there were no eagles left. Now there are eagles.
The vast wildlife habitat provided by the Great Lakes and their tributary rivers also forms a natural 721-mile boundary between Michigan and its international neighbor, Ontario, Canada. For many years, the only way to get from one shore to the other was by ferry. But the growth of the car industry following World War I overburdened the ferry system's main crossing point on the Detroit River. The solution was the Detroit-Windsor Tunnel, an unparalleled engineering feat that defied the critics when it opened on November 1st, 1930. First, more than 700,000 tons of muddy silt had to be dredged from the river bottom. Then, working from both sides of the river simultaneously, 9 250-foot-long tubes, each weighing 3,500 tons, were lowered into place.
And when the work was finished and the two sections united, there was less than 1 inch of difference between the two.
The tunnel is unique.
This is still the only tunnel that goes between two countries, that goes under a river, that you can drive through.
And it's busy. Every day, some 17,000 cars and trucks travel through the tunnel.
The Detroit-Windsor International border is easily the busiest border between Canada and the United States.
All those cars would have made auto pioneer Henry Ford very, very happy. He built his empire just a few miles from the tunnel's entrance at the confluence of the Detroit and Rouge rivers. In the 1920s and 30s, Ford's Rouge plant was the largest and most sophisticated industrial complex in the world.
Perhaps Henry Ford's greatest vision was a factory that he built on the banks of the Rouge River in Dearborn. And he conceived the Rouge as a place where the raw materials that he would own, coal from his coal mines, ore from his ore mines, wood from his forests, would come together at this massive factory.
At its peak, the facility was 1.5 miles wide and over 1 mile long. More than 80,000 employees turned raw materials into Fords.
That's the true genius of Henry Ford. He kept thinking about how do we work more effectively, more productively. And in fact, he reduced the costs of automobiles so everybody could afford one.
By creating the cheap automobile and making it abundant, by creating mass production, he created much of what became the 20th century.
As Michigan faces the challenges of the 21st century, it must balance its role as an industrial giant with that of a steward to a land of incomparable natural beauty.
Forests and the lakes of Michigan have been important since the first Native Americans settled there. The Song of Hiawatha is all about that region, life on Lake Michigan. And that's one of the great virtues of that place. You relate to nature. Again, your bare feet touch Mother Earth.
Look here. I'm talking about America, sweet America.